join us in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Glad to everybody here this evening. We have an evening session, right, Mr. Ellis? That is correct. You like those, don't you? No comment. I understand, right? Let's approve the minutes of the May the 28th, 2019 regular meeting, please. Motion? Mr. Baker?
Second.
Mr. Schmidt? All yes?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, public comments. Did anyone sign in, Ray?
No, sir.
Okay, no one signed in to speak report this evening. So we'll go to the presentations and reports section. First, we have the Lincoln Primary CEO, Lisa Leach. We'll talk about school-based health center update.
Yeah,
And
well, thank you for
Thank
allowing
you.
us to take just a few minutes. What I'd like to do is just once a year, just stop in.
Well, we're glad
and
to have
give
you
you a
here.
little glance at how we're doing, and, but more importantly, is, hey Joe, it's nice to meet you. But more importantly, to ask you how we're doing, and to get some feedback, so. I have a few extras there if somebody wants some, so.
we appreciate you coming. This is a positive thing. We're glad to have you.
Yeah, well, good. Just real quick there, we are Lincoln Primary Care Center. We originated that, but because we've expanded to so many counties and so many sites, we're really moving towards the Southern West Virginia Health System name. So I just wanted to mention that on the front. The next page, you probably know, but in the event that you don't, I've listed the school-based health centers here in Lincoln County and the nurse practitioners and the providers that work at those locations. We have wonderful providers, and we're real happy. And as a matter of fact, one of our wonderful providers is here, Renee Christian. You all may know Renee, and she works there at the Duval Clinic. So she's a gem. With me, I also have Courtney Reynolds. Courtney is a physician assistant, but she's also the chief operating officer at Lincoln Primary Care. So I brought her with me. I'm smart enough to know to bring a clinical person because I'm non-clinical, so if we have questions, she can answer them. And then the next page, I wanted you to see, now these numbers are just from July 1st of last year through the end of March, but I wanted you to see the numbers that we're seeing at these clinics. So you can see there at Lincoln County High School in that time period, we saw just over 1,100 students, staff, faculty, the combination. At Duval, you can see there, those numbers look greater. There's almost 1,400 in that time period. Midway, now we're only at midday, 1 day a week. And so therefore you would see the numbers are lower, there's 62. Rangers the same way, 1 day a week, there's 128. And at Guyan Valley, it's over 2,500, but I put an asterisk there because you need to keep in mind, we see students there, but also the regular general population there as well. Dr. Vance sees a lot of them. And then dental rotates, and so we've actually seen an increase in our dental. We're trying to do better with the dental program, focus on it more, but you can see there that they actually saw 712 students in that time. I just wanted to mention some of our partnerships, because we have a great partnership that we do a lot of things together, and again, we appreciate that you allow us to be in your schools to provide health care to the students. And some of the things we do, Dr. Elkins and Dr. Soltis are on your sidelines to provide some coverage. Dr. Elkins wants to get a big, pretty tent that he can set up so that when players are injured, he can bring him in and have a little more privacy. So we are going to work on that, so you can have that for your sidelines. We do free sports, Special Olympic and Junior ROTC physicals. We've made contributions to the Lincoln County High School Athletics band and the health occupations program. We've also made contributions to Guyan Valley Hamlin pre-K through 8th grade for the Leader in Me program, as well as athletics, and also Duval there. We have the fitness center, or the wellness center on our campus, and that is free to students who are in a sanctioned activity by the school, such as, it's not going to be youth sports, but if they're in band or football or basketball, cheerleading, everything that's sanctioned by the high school, they can come. Now, if they're under 13, they have to have their parent with them when they use the membership. And then we have Fit Camp, and Renee has been doing Fit Camp for
10 years.
10 years. And it's a wonderful, wonderful program, and I believe that was your brainchild.
Yes.
And she's very passionate about that, and we've actually extended that this year, and we're going to be down in Gilbert this summer as well. So we're excited. It's her passion. We love that she just takes charge and she does that for the students. So it's a good opportunity for the students. And then we also, Prestera is at the high school. It varies, but we also provide that service as well. And with that, the next page is other opportunities and needs. I know I'm going through it quick, but I really didn't want to do a lot of talking. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of some numbers where we are and get some feedback on how you think we're doing. Any thoughts about other things that we can be working on together in the future? And be happy to answer any question you have.
Probably a couple things, but one, once again, we're just, it's a great thing that we had the opportunity to have these health services provided for our students. For many years, everybody who happened to be there was a nurse or whatever it might be, and now they have somebody that's a professional, just a wonderful thing.
Well, it's a nice supplement to
Well,
nursing.
and it takes a lot of a burden off of the staff there. We're doing other things that are not obviously trained in the health field typically. So it's a great thing for us. So we're certainly, it's a cooperative thing for you all, I suppose. Now, noticing that at Ranger and Midway, they're only on Wednesdays. Is there any possibility, is that based upon the enrollment, and is there any possibility that could expand?
I have to defer to you on need.
I believe when we started at Midway and Ranger, it was through a grant program, through the school board or through the schools, and so that's kind of where we started with. The schools are much smaller as well, so we do look at need there. We've not assessed the need to extend more days, but that's something that we can do, definitely, because they are such small schools, that not only we're only being there one day, but they are smaller, so that's why the numbers are a little bit different. But, I think something over the next year we can definitely look at.
Well, also at Midway, they're larger than Ranger, but isn't the Allen Creek facility a part of that too? Your all's clinic in Allen Creek that somewhere I heard something.
Sand plant,
Sand
yeah.
plant, yeah, we have the new
That-
sand plant.
For some reason, I was thinking that was part of the reasoning behind that.
It's very close.
Yeah.
And actually one of the providers that works at our sand plant location, Lisa Queen, she is actually the nurse practitioner that goes to that site as well. And so there's that kind of crossover between it. And I would say it's just a few miles down the road from the school. But again, that being said, we can also, I think we would behoove us anyway to look at that.
A couple of things. We're going to be doing some clinical strategic planning here soon, but at the same time, we have been fortunate to recruit some more physicians. We have a full-time physician that's going to start at Sand Plant in August, and is she from not Sissonville, but Summersville, West Virginia girl. Thrilled to death to have her, love her. That's going to free up other providers who we could take a look at Lisa, who's there one day to see if Lisa could do more often. Part of the problem in the past has been there was an exodus of providers here about a couple of years ago. And so we're rebuilding, and so we have her on board in August. We have a third-year resident, Dr. Laura Gibbon, and her husband practices in Huntington, but she's been doing her rotations here, and we've got a contract with her to start full-time at the Hamlin location. We also have another physician assistant, Jackson Austin, that's going to start at the Hamlin location. So we're ramping back up. We're able to start recruiting, and in doing so, then we can take a look at where are the gaps in healthcare. So we could take a look at, like Lisa Queen, potentially going to Midway more often.
And what would you all, just out of curiosity, what are your all's thoughts of what would you all like to see at those schools?
Well, I don't know, just like the other schools, at the high school, there's someone there all the time,
Right.
I take it.
Right.
Now, at Guyan Valley, you're pretty close, so essentially there's somebody there all the time too. At the other schools, what availability are there at those schools?
Do
Like,
those
I'm there Monday through Friday,
Yes.
Are you
7 to
there
3.
like all day long? All
Yeah.
day?
Yeah.
Because I'm not really familiar with the hours that would be there.
Ideally, that's what you want. Ideally, you want a provider there because it's, when children are sick, they can't wait for that one day a week for the provider to be there to be seen. And so ideally, it's what you want. So we may have that opportunity
And I
with the additional
also,
positions.
Lisa Adkins, a nurse practitioner at the high school, mentioned, there's not a school based at Hamlin Middle either. And she actually offered, to see what you all thought about limited service there too. She was just curious what the board thought about that.
I don't know about as far as facilities availability.
That may be a question out there in space, but I'm sure you're not going to do that. Obviously, we would like to have.
Sure.
a school
Well,
based-
She sees a lot of students from there, and so whenever we were talking about coming this evening, that was one of the things that she said, she does see a lot of students that come from the middle school to the high school to see her. And she just thought that that might be a good topic for discussion.
Well, ideally, we'd love to have a school-based wellness center in all the counties we serve. I mean, but they're needed there. And just so you know, as a fairly qualified health center, every couple of years, we're eligible for what's called new access points. And so we can apply for grant dollars if it's gonna be a new clinic. And that helps us in situations where if in a school there's not space, if we need to get a modular, whatever we need to do, we can apply for grant dollars to buy the modular to build a building. If we're already in existing school space that you can provide us, our overhead really to start is very limited because it's basically salary cost and some supplies and exam tables, things like that. So if there's space, it's much easier for us to go in and start a clinic than if we actually have to build something, put something on campus. And speaking of putting something in Guyan Valley, we're gonna be replacing that clinic. You probably know better than I that it was a house that was pretty much wrapped with aluminum or metal siding, whatever it is, and so the inside of it doesn't look as nice as the outside, and it's very small space, and so we are going to be replacing that potentially with a two-story office space, depends on the types of services we're gonna put there. It will include a pharmacy, a drive-through pharmacy.
And we also hope to be able to have a covered walkway built.
For students to come back and
Yeah,
forth.
'cause right now, an umbrella is what, is
Yeah,
what's
so
used,
we'll-
but-
That's the cover.
That'll make
Yeah.
it better for the students, so I just wanted to mention that. And of
Won't
course,
be good for you, Mr.
It would be, it'd help,
Yeah.
what,
Okay.
any idea when that
well, we have some plans that the, you'll put this in paper maybe? We're looking at acquiring some additional property there, which would allow us to go ahead and construct the new building. And we could continue to have services while we're constructing the new building. And it would be closer to the property in which we could put that canopy. So right now, we had to wait a while to get that property appraised, and we're in the process of making an offer for that additional property right there. So if you're familiar with it, you probably know what I'm talking about. So right now, we're waiting to see that. If we can do that, then we're gonna start building there, we would hope in the fall.
That's awesome.
And I was wondering about the transition, but that would make it.
Yeah, that makes,
much easier.
yeah, it would be tough to do otherwise.
So there's no services in Hearts at all?
No,
There's not school-based health services at this point in time at the Hearts facilities. We have to, as a federally qualified health center, we have to look at service area and proximity to other federally qualified health centers.
Valley Health?
Valley Health has a clinic in Hearts, and so that has caused a little bit of difficulty because of the proximity to their health center. We have to get approval through the
we have to
government.
go to them and say,
HRSA.
would you give us a letter of
Yes.
support to put this in?
I was wondering if there was some kind
And
of.
typically, school-based health centers, you know, the FQHCs go along pretty well with health,
Mhm.
but when it's a freestanding clinic, they sometimes get a little testy. So I mean, there's the potential, but we would have to go to Steve Shadows of Valley Health and say, this is our intention, would you support that? Now, even if he doesn't, that doesn't mean we can't do it, but it's certainly, much easier if we could get their support.
And that's kind of why we focused on the areas within our current service area, is because it was much easier for us to open up those sites because it was already in their service area. And we could get those up a little bit quicker, essentially.
So in theory, they could open one maybe.
In theory,
Correct.
if they-
absolutely.
If they chose,
Absolutely,
but if not, they might be willing to let
Yes.
you all do that.
yeah. So that'll be something that we can keep on our list as we have the clinical strategic retreat, which we'll be having here soon. Any of,
Dental.
yeah.
Exactly how intensive is, how much dental actually occurs, how's that done?
They do, this year, I wanna say this year, we kinda changed up the schedule a little bit until we made, kind of their permanent location, Lincoln County High School, on Mondays. So that way, if there was a need in the community, from the other schools, they knew they were always gonna be at Lincoln County High School every Monday. And they, then they kind of, the other days of the week, they go between Lincoln and Logan County schools. They look at the consent process, they see what's needed. They do, the initial evaluation by the dentist. They do preventative care like sealants and those types of things. They do minor cavities as well, but any extensive dental work, they refer out.
And they're really good. If I need a child to be seen and they're even in Logan, one of them lives in Lincoln County, she'll come and see them. Usually that day, she'll try to make her way to us if we call her. So they're on call for us also.
Two teeth, you know, they kind of
Yeah.
want attention.
Yes.
You have those problems. Okay. Well, anyone have anything else? I know Mr. Baker was excited about seeing that free wellness center activity.
Well, I didn't realize that,
I'm sorry.
that athletes had free access to the wellness center.
Band members, I said, any sanctioned school event. And if they're 13 and above, they can come in on their own, but under 13, they can come with a parent or coach. Yep, you bet.
Now, are they supervised by anyone? when
We
they're in
have a
there?
staff person there to help with equipment, or if there's an emergency, they can call it. So we do have a staff person there. Yes.
It's not a clinical staff person.
No, it's
Right.
just,
But the hours that they're open is when our main clinic is open as well.
So they could be there when the silver sneaker people show up.
sure.
Absolutely.
Sure. Sure.
I've got my card, I just haven't walked in yet.
You know, and hopefully soon we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the community center. You know, that's next on our list, because we got Guyan Valley and we've got the community center. We really hope that we can start heating up some discussions about the community center as well, because we'd really like to get it started as soon as possible. We've had a lot of major projects, and one of them has been the MAN project, and it's been ongoing for 4 or 5 years, and so I've aggressively tried to move that forward the past 12 months, and we've done so. It's just kind of taken over. It's kind of taken over energy, but now that that's moving along, we can really focus on Guyan Valley and the community center.
We noticed you all have been active in some other areas recently too, so we understand.
Yeah. It was a great town hall meeting. You know, people don't know me, I'm very transparent, sometimes to a fault. And the intent was to educate people and to listen to them. The last thing we want to do is cause problems. We're here to help the community fix things. And so the feedback I got was that people appreciated knowing more about the program. And I think there's still a few people that just don't like the concept. We didn't expect to change everybody's minds. But I thought it went well. No one was hostile. They asked a lot of questions. We answered as well as we could. Very honest in that we're going to go back to our board meeting this month and talk about what are next steps. And obviously, if we're going to continue to do MAT, it will be at our main campus, but we're going to have to move departments and remodel before we can provide that service, because the good thing is we're busting out the seams. And right now, we actually have a full-time pulmonologist on board, and we're going to be focused on bringing some more specialty clinics in the area of endocrinology and cardiology. So it's a good problem to have, but it means we can't do anything quickly.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
once again, no one has anything else, we go.
Thank you for letting us
Appreciate
your
you
time.
coming, and
Okay.
we invite you back, you know, on a regular basis. We enjoy hearing these things. We all learned different things today that we didn't know.
And please reach out. My contact information, the last page, I said I left these girls' names off. It's not that I want to take all the credit. I was just doing it and didn't include them. But any questions you have, I'm happy to talk with you. And if I can't answer them, I will certainly get the right staff person available to answer your questions.
Very good. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay, we've got one other report presentation this evening. Superintendent Minkiff and Special Ed Director Ricky Love are going to talk about the student dress code guidelines. You want to get up to this one? He was up here at the lecture when I came in. I think he was practicing.
Oh, you're gonna come stand up here?
I'm going, yeah, I'll come forward. I have some handouts. I had pushed this out to the board members the other day electronically, so these are just hard copies of what I've shared with you. And these are our current dress codes by school. Mr. King was kind enough to
Well, this is the current dress code.
copy and
Hamlin,
paste what we was getting.
Hamlin, exactly.
That's what mine got right in.
You want to look on? I know, you know what they are.
No, there's a one page.
Yeah, no, then what you're looking at now are the current dress codes. I want to tell you how we got these draft in here, what they're proposing. I'm going to give that to you in just a moment.
Oh, okay.
Yep. I'm gonna give you that. In 2011, policy 4373 was revised in such a fashion that it removed the requirement in code for the superintendent to establish guidelines for the dress codes for the schools and placed that responsibility on the principals. Our guidelines that we have that go with our current policy reflects that change. However, our policy was never revised to reflect the change. So the reason, if you're wondering why we ended up with 8 schools with 8 different sets of guidelines for the dress code is because of what happened at the state level in 2011. So that set into play, principals working with their staff, putting committees together, and including students. I know at the high school there was a lot of work involved with the students in the development of their dress code. And what our current policy says is that each principal, or actually our guidelines say that each principal in consultation with his or her staff shall develop a dress code which complies with the West Virginia Department of Education Policy 4373. And without going into specifics, it just says what needs to be addressed is that a student will not dress or groom in a manner that disrupts the educational process or is detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of others. A student will not dress in a manner that's distracting or indecent to the extent that it interferes with the teaching and learning process, including wearing any apparel that displays or promotes any drug, alcohol, or tobacco-related product that is prohibited in school buildings, on school grounds, in school leased or owned vehicles, and in all school-affiliated functions. So those were the minimum requirements to be addressed in each of the schools' dress codes. Also with a requirement that any such restrictions on student dress also apply to employees. That's currently within the guidelines that we have.
Now, would you refer to those as the existing administrative guidelines?
That's what we currently have
Okay.
now
I just wanted to define them.
as a school system. So we have a policy out there that it's, of course, it's a Neola policy. It looks like it was last revised in 2007. It doesn't necessarily reflect what happened in 2011. It just references policy 4373, but the code itself, or the policy itself, places the requirement to come up with the guidelines on the superintendent. So all that's changed, and we're going to have to revise our policy to reflect what there is currently in code.
Now, we're going to have to change our, revise our policy or our guidelines and or both.
Both.
Okay.
All right. Policy 4373 just recently underwent another revision that is effective July 1st of this year. Nothing that wasn't complicated before. Now, the code says, or policy, state policy refers to dress codes requiring school uniforms for students. So it's what the code now says is that county boards may require students to have or wear a school uniform. You don't have to, but if you want to, you can. It says this policy does not require county boards of education to adopt dress codes requiring students to wear school uniforms, nor does this policy prevent a county board of education from adopting a school dress code policy. What I've learned in researching this last few weeks, some counties don't have dress code policy. They've guidelines, but they don't have a policy because it's not required.
But if you require it, you have to pay for it.
Right, if you want to ask them to wear a school uniform.
That's
you
right.
gotta pay. So the policy now has been completely rewritten. It looks nothing like it did before. And really kind of just revolves around school boards that would desire or would want to require school uniforms. So that's what we currently will have in as of July 1st this year.
But it also says, doesn't it, that or guidelines.
Right. It does. So we have Dr. Lowe, who's headed up our dress code committee, and they've met recently and came up with a draft set of recommendations for our dress code moving forward. And all of that, Dr. Lowe talked about the work of the committee and how they arrived at these recommendations.
I was not present at the board meeting in which then it was your wish then for a committee to look at countywide guidelines. So I did read the article that Mr. Donahue had printed, and I contacted the mom that had spoken to you all, and she sat in as a parent representative on our committee so that we could also have that parental input. There were representatives from each school that were invited to participate, and it was explained as to why we were doing that. And when we came together face to face, the first thing that we did is we reviewed current case law and Supreme Court cases and current news outlets that are taking up the idea of dress codes. The Supreme Court case that we reviewed, just to make sure that everybody was on the same page about what we can and cannot do in dress codes, is the Tinker versus Des Moines case. And essentially, students' rights do not end at the schoolhouse door, and that as long as what they are wearing does not disrupt educational process, they have the right to do so. From then, we looked at current dress codes and current situations that are going on across the United States, the resolutions to those, as well as some dress codes from very prominent businesses in our area to see what is expected based on different types of work. And one of the things that we kept in where we were going to focus on creating these guidelines is that guidelines should have purpose. And our purpose needs to be able to be upheld with policy or law or case law, and that if we can't explain our purpose, then maybe that guideline is not needed in what we wanted to present to you. So the committee we started, and then we probably had about 10 different revisions to get what you all have in front of you. And it was designed to basically go from the top of your head to your soles of your feet to what would be appropriate for school dress to be able to learn in an accepted environment.
Was it Tinker or Tinker case?
Tinker.
That's pretty many years ago.
It was. It's still the landmark case to garner whether or not something is appropriate, either by right of protest or
I mean, we're
constitutional
talking
right
30
of
or
free
40
speech.
This is a case of 30 or 40 years ago, right?
Yes, it's still considered the case that
Okay.
is kind of the standard.
I just wanted to make sure we're talking
It
about
is.
the same one.
Same one.
Okay. I vaguely remember that.
So you see, similarities in our current guidelines that we have in most of our schools, and they encompass what was at the time required in policy 4373.
Let me ask you a question, Jeff, or either one of you. When you go through this process now, you have to revise the county policy, apparently do something with the administrative guidelines revised, or what it seems like in some way. Will schools then have, may they then have guidelines in addition to those dress codes?
I think we want to just. be
Well, I'm
consistent.
saying-
It doesn't follow the, 4373 doesn't say that there would be further guidelines placed upon whatever the county would adopt, I guess, as a system. But going back to what we discussed there a few weeks ago, it just seems to me that it only makes sense that we're consistent for one school to the next. You know,
So you're
the
thinking that
expectation
would
of
not
the child,
be-
we transfer or move from one school to another and an entirely different set of rules to follow, just makes no sense.
That's what gets you into trouble.
Right. But I understand how we arrived there, I mean, you know, how we got there because of what happened 8 years ago. But I think I believe we need to clean it up and have a consistent set of guidelines for all schools.
Well, let me ask you this, and I haven't had a chance to look at the state policy you've been talking about, but my understanding is from the 2011 version, it placed the responsibility for doing that on principals.
Right.
Do you have the authority under the July 1 effective policy to set a countywide policy?
It doesn't really say, which is kind of strange, but it's really vague in the.
Because
what
I
says.
mean, I don't mean to interrupt.
Well, I
but
want you to see it, because let me let you see it.
It sounds like under the 2011 version that probably wouldn't have.
This is the language, and that's all there is to it.
That this is the new.
That's the new one.
But you can understand, or I guess we can understand why individual schools had policies based upon the way the 2011 policy was written by the state.
I had to go back because it's been so long.
Well, but I mean, it makes sense that they're essentially telling the principals to do it, so that tells me your school needs to have a policy.
And that's how that happened.
Yeah. Right, Kurt?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty clear. I mean, it's what you quoted a moment ago. Nor prevent a county board of education from adopting a dress code policy, which is what we're contemplating doing.
Right.
Okay.
Policy or, well, okay, go ahead.
This is gonna be 4373 effective July 1. So do we have to wait to formalize all this until after July 1 when this is effective?
I think we can go ahead and start our work.
Yeah, but we're not gonna
The
be.
state board's already approved the policy, it comes to July 1. This is going to hamper our efforts to get our student handbook information out. We may have to just go ahead, Kirk and I talked about that today. We may just need to go ahead and push out what we have with an understanding that when the kids come back, that we will have to hand them the dress code policy or guidelines.
That might not be available when school starts, or that
Right.
matter.
So, I mean, it's, just depends on how this all plays out. But as far as the handbooks, that we're gonna have to go ahead and move on them now. It's
So
just,
what you're saying is, the board will vote on the policy. We're gonna create a policy.
we have the option of doing so.
If we do that, the board will be voting on it.
Right, so if the board decides if you want to have a policy, then we can do so, and according to what Rowdy has there, we don't have to do it. We can just develop a set of guidelines.
But the other guidelines, the board had nothing to do with, actually.
Now, if you do that, then that means you're gonna have a board policy revision, they'll go on review and receive comments and all that.
Right. I think we have to clean up our policy.
Well, I mean,
it's been so long.
I'm trying to understand this.
Yeah, me too. I've been trying to wrap my head around what's happening.
You know, well, why don't we create a policy that says we have a policy on dress code as reflected in our guidelines? We adopt the policy, what's there to approve? We're going to adopt guidelines that will reflect our policy. I mean, this says you can adopt the dress code policy.
When I looked at some surrounding counties, of course, we've got a couple counties adjacent to us that has the same exact Neola policy. Their policy's out of date as well. Others have their own policies, and one of those counties I was looking at, their policy actually is a set of guidelines. I won't say county, which county it is, but their policy that the board has approved is actually a set of guidelines.
But there's specific guidelines.
Yes.
I mean, I guess, just trying to, there's really no difference in the semantics.
Right. The way they did, the way they.
Well, I mean, they developed a policy that said these are our guidelines,
And said,
but
right.
they still have them there, so.
Yeah,
just
you know what it typically policies.
What do you
would
want
be
to call
vague.
it?
Right.
Okay.
And would have, our policy incorporated the things I had read earlier. And Steve, I'll let you see this. This is our current policy. And it talks about the very same things here that are required to be incorporated into your guidelines.
Now, in the new revisions by the state board, are these still relevant or required?
You know, the
Who
silly
knows?
thing is no, it's not.
Okay,
That's it.
what
I
I'm
mean,
saying.
it is.
You can adopt a
completely different.
uniform, or you can adopt a dress code policy.
But-
That's literally what this says.
So if we stick with a similar format, what we could do is, I mean, as a board, we could have a policy
That addresses all of these.
that
types
says
of-
those things, like that first part would remain pretty much the same, and then go on to say whether, if it's a superintendent, that's fine, we'll develop a set of guidelines for all of our schools to.
So it would be optional whether you included all these components.
So we could, the policy could be vague in terms of, like, it's lacking specifics, and then you come up with a set of guidelines administratively that the board wouldn't necessarily approve, or, you know.
Okay.
So every,
Which I think
again,
makes more sense. I think it makes more sense to do what you just suggested. To have a policy that embodies these generalities, and then your guidelines reflect the specific requirements. And I think that's the case because a policy is law.
you're locked in.
It's law, you're locked in. A guideline is just that, it's a guideline. You know, you're talking about a dress code, and I love this, by the way, because it is very short, it's very to the point, it's very easy to understand, and it's very simplistically written. Anybody can understand this. But even if we had a dress code that was 10 page, or dress code guidelines that were 10 pages long, you're still going to run onto issues where you don't have a definitive answer. If you have a policy, your answer has to come from that policy. If you have guidelines, then you have some leeway to figure on it. Now that's how things work in my world in the law. And it's similar anytime you're looking at policy versus guidelines. Now, other people may differ.
I do differ. I feel exactly the opposite from that. I think you need more specificity, or whatever you pronounce it, because I think this is too brief and it doesn't address things. It leaves too much to, well, if I'm a parent and I do something that happens and at the school they don't think it's appropriate, then I can't, if I'm the principal there at that school, I can't defend my position because I have something that's so vague that they can say, well, it doesn't say that. I'd like for it to be more clear to be able to say, this is what you can and cannot do. I like it to be specific. So this is what it is. It goes out to everybody, and it doesn't matter what, if you do it countywide, what school you are, this is what it is. And I think if it's too vague, that it's too open to interpretation, that could cause problems in interpretation with parents and, you know, in trying to figure out what we are or are not allowed to do. And I can see discrepancies or differences between schools if that occurs. One school might figure that this is okay to do this, while another school says, no, we don't allow that. That's where I can see the changes being if you aren't specific.
And if you're so that specific, though, you get right back to the problem we had here.
Well, I don't really think we had a problem. You
Yeah,
know,
we did.
No,
We had a big problem.
No, we didn't either. But when I've been thinking about this. When Mrs. Miller came that night, she came because she said it wasn't being consistently abided by or interpreted or whatever the term is. Enforced. Right, exactly, enforced. So her gripe or concern wasn't with the policy and what it was at Guyan Valley. It wasn't being enforced in the same way all the time. So it wasn't really the policy that she had issue with. It was the enforcement of it that was the problem.
No, there were issues with the policy as well, regarding the things that are not prohibited here, like headbands, et cetera, bows that couldn't be worn at Guyan Valley that are permitted under this. Things that are common, that are not offensive, that are not.
Well, then that's where you get into, are they or are they not, is whether they should or should not be. But once again, I think she came here because of the inconsistency. Her child had gone to school at the beginning of the year, if she wore a certain outfit, it was okay. Towards the end of the year, if she wore the same thing, it wasn't okay. That was really what I got the reason that she came. Now, maybe as she got here, she delineated different things in there that might have been a concern that, you know, that why should they not be able to do this or do that. But I think it was the inconsistency that was really what, you know, it brought her. You weren't here, so you don't know.
You have some knowledge, don't
I have a little,
you?
You read Sean's article.
yeah, I talked to them all.
The current dress codes that we have at our schools, would any of those stand out to you that you thought were?
I read through each one of these, and I don't really have I have a couple of remarks I would have made on each one, but for the most part, I think they're okay.
I do too, I thought, I agree with about everything on that.
I asked that question because, I've read through them several times, and the one that really seems to encompass everything that's to be addressed according to 4373 seems to be the high school's dress code. I mean, that dress code is pretty thorough in what it covers, and I think it's pretty specific with what the expectations are.
Well, and they mentioned here in something, as far as student behavior, all of this, and they allude to it here in a couple of places, dress directly affects behavior. I firmly believe that. And that's both from staff and from students. School is not leisurely time off at the end of the school day. It's not going to the mall dress. It's not going to a ball game dress. There's a difference there. Now, I'm not saying it's not a uniform type atmosphere. It doesn't have to be, but it's somewhere in between. And they mentioned here, like in this one, remind you, you're on the job at school. What I think of are students that graduate from school and then they go to a job interview because they've been in a lax atmosphere, and they go in with a t-shirt, shorts, a baseball hat that's on backwards, and they think they're going to interview for a job. At the opposite of that is what we're trying to do in CTE programs, where we try to emulate the way people ought to act. We want them to, form companies and do this, that, and the other, dress appropriately. And school should be somewhere in the middle of that for the average student. Now, CTE, they obviously have their reasons, but school should be, it's not your wear that I want to wear when I go down to the mall or something. That's not what school should be. And students perceive their dress and their teacher's dress, it affects the way they act. I don't care what anybody says, I know it does. I've seen it too many times. The way a teacher is, their attire, it affects how those students are. And the same with them. The way they're dressed affects the way their behavior is. I mean, I just firmly believe that. And that's why some of these things I probably disagree with. But I've said,
Some of them I do too. A 3-inch inseam on a teacher in a skirt is not gonna.
Well, Carol, I saw that, I didn't know what that even meant. I said, where's my phone? I got that.
3 inches is not
Well, I know,
very
but
long.
I had to Google what an inseam was. I said, I sent Mr. Mickey a note. I said, 3-inch inseam. I read that, so it said 3-inch from the crotch. And I'm thinking, 3-inch from the crotch is what the guideline is going to be. But then, of course, I wasn't thinking this about a dress or whatever, but I was thinking about shorts.
What do you think, short?
Well, but with shorts, because I've thought through this too much probably. It depends on what type of shorts I wear, There's long Bermuda shorts, and so the crotch is relatively long and it'd be 3 inches. And there's what we, in the olden days, called short shorts, which were, not very long at all, and the crotch area was not very long either. And 3 inches from there, that 3 inch thing really got me. That's why somebody in here had mid-thigh. That made, because we were up here, the young lady was, showing us her hands went below her shorts or whatever it was. I can see this, some people's arms are longer than others and all that kind of, but mid-thigh made sense to me, it's mid-thigh, and that's easy to see, it's mid-thigh, and, that's.
What's mid-thigh? You gonna put a tape measure down a girl's thigh and measure it, split it in two and say, oh, didn't have, see, and that's a problem you run into with specificity. If you go with mid-thigh, you've gotta lay a roller on it. You gotta measure it, you gotta divide it.
I look at their belt and I look at their knees and I go halfway down and you're right, that's mid-thigh.
5 starts at
Why don't
front
you want to get
step.
3 inches?
From the inside, that's easy to measure. You have a female teacher go in the restroom with them, you measure the shorts.
And you want your teachers wearing that too, huh?
Look, what's this say? Draft student dress code guidelines. It doesn't say anything about teachers.
Yeah, but this applies to
Yeah.
teachers too.
No, this is draft for students. We haven't got the teachers yet.
It's
We
students,
won't.
but I think it's,
Yeah.
I agree, this is for students.
Yeah, this is for students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
See, I have an advantage over you all in that I make my living interpreting things. That's what I do. I read documents like this, I interpret, and I look for loopholes. When you come up with these very, 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 very specific guidelines, there are things that I can see that ought to be in there, like from the LCHS policy. Apparel, accessories, buttons, or jewelry that depict vulgarity or prohibited substances are prohibited. That's not in this.
Exactly.
We need something like that in here, but you've also got to balance what's in this last numbered paragraph. You can wear those things if they express constitutionally protected speech. That's one of the things you looked at in reading the case law on it. Is, someone could wear a shirt depicting tobacco if it also has a message that is constitutionally protected speech. So when you get very specific, you're asking for trouble on a lot of levels. There is no perfect answer. We can agree to disagree. If we codify this in a policy, we as a board vote on it. You all may vote 4-1. I'm against specifics. I think they're going to create more problems. Generalities give the administration at this level and at the school level the opportunity to handle dress code issues without them becoming a big, huge issue. If there's specific bright line limitations, then it's a disciplinary infraction. If you wear something that someone believes violates that specific line item. I think the whole dress code thing is blown so far out of proportion. It ought to be handled at the school level with consistency. Everybody ought to know that this policy should be specific enough so that anybody can pick it up. Anybody with a 6th, 7th grade education should be able to pick it up, read it, and understand what the child can wear to school. Kids ought to be able to read it and understand it. If it gets too big, what do? You read the first and last paragraph. You forget everything in the middle where all the important stuff is. So, kudos, from my perspective, kudos to you for coming up with something that was acceptable to a group. I assume you also discussed this with the school administrators?
There was an administrator on that committee, and each of the committee members were asked to talk with their school staff as well as their administration about what are like their non-negotiables, what are their concerns, what overall do they need to be able to see. And we were able to create one that any question that they had, including that one, I can answer which line of that is supported. So they cannot have vulgarity, prohibited drugs, alcohol, tobacco use. All state and county policies concerning appropriate language are also enforced for dress.
and that, where is that part of it located?
All state and county policies concerning appropriate language are also enforced for dress is the last sentence of the paragraph.
Oh.
Yeah, and by
Well,
appropriate
that-
language, you mean things on clothing.
And
And
that's
so-
where, the average parent has no clue what
Yeah,
that means.
I agree.
No clue what that means.
Yep.
Um,
I agree, a line item adopting, the third, I think it's the third bulleted point in the LCHS, and then the last. Though, that probably needs to be more specific. I agree with Steve that nobody's gonna understand I didn't understand that's what that meant when I read it.
Well, let's change course here just a second. Shoes.
Yes, sir.
Now, I can wear shoes that are attached to the foot must be worn for playground duty, and tennis shoes or similar soled shoes must be worn for PE. What kind of shoes do I wear throughout their school day?
Wear a shoe. You wear a shoe. We have guidelines that say flip-flops are okay. We have guidelines that say flip-flops
That's
are
what
not.
I'm getting.
Well, what's the issue and what's the concern? And so if the concern is, well, they could fall. Well, you could also fall if you wear dress shoes, if you wear high heels, but those weren't limited. Well, what if it rains and they slip on the sidewalk? Well, what if it rains and you slip on the sidewalk anyway. You cannot make a guideline for every what-if possibility.
What if you're in the
And so-
restrooms in an unsanitary area with shoes that are exposing the foot area and all?
Okay, well, I don't understand your question.
Well, I mean, it's unsanitary. If I'm in there in flip-flops, it can lead to an unsanitary condition.
But it can also with sandals.
Or tennis shoes,
Well, I'm not
made
saying-
tennis shoes.
Well, tennis shoes, you know, to me, what I liked was, I thought the first part was good. Shoes that are attached to the foot must be worn, strike out for playground duty. And tennis shoes or similar soled shoes must be worn for PE. Now, that made sense to me. Get rid of that, why playground duty or playground play came into it there, I don't know. Because, you know, if I was on a playground, I want to wear tennis shoes anyway. But shoes that are attached to the foot, and I'm assuming by that they thought if they had to have ever how many sides there are to a shoe. But that made sense to me. Shoes that are attached to the foot must be worn, and shoes, of course, tennis shoes for similar sole for PE.
Every shoe's attached to the foot, Steve.
That's what I'm thinking.
Every shoe's attached to the foot, one way, shape, form, or another.
Well, I thought the desire here was that they were trying to make it more than a flip-flop, which is attached, if you're lucky, if it doesn't go out on you like it did Jimmy Buffett. He popped his top or whatever that was.
You run into discrimination issues, quite frankly.
I don't think so. I think you base that on, once again, I disagree about that it's a safe shoe, that, I guess you wear high heels. I don't know what you're talking about there, but typical dress shoes aren't unsafe. Mr. Mickey's shoes there, I think he's safe. If he's flopping in flip-flops, I think he's running, he could possibly hurt himself. And so I don't know about that. Plus the bathroom and locker room issues, I think, with shoes that you don't have, that aren't totally encompass your foot are, me, unacceptable. That may not be everybody.
Let me tell you a funny story, and this is true, and this is fun. I went to pick my daughter up. She was not feeling well one day at school. It was raining outside. I had on tennis shoes, lace-up tennis shoes. They were tied, had on socks underneath them. She, on the other hand, had on a pair of Crocs. And I don't like my kids to wear Crocs, flip-flops, etc. at school. I want them to wear tennis shoes, just like you. So we're coming out of Guyan Valley, down the front steps that are painted that nice navy gray color. And as I said, it rained. Well, one of the two of us hit the first step, and that person's feet went out from under him, and he is still suffering from rib injuries he sustained that day, about 5-6 weeks ago. Whereas my daughter in her Crocs, she didn't slip slide down the steps. I did. My feet shot straight out from under me on those nice painted steps, and had I not been holding on the handrail, I'd have probably killed myself. So, tennis shoes are wonderful, and I had good tennis shoes on. But my feet still went out from underneath me. Hers didn't in Crocs.
Well, she's more agile than you, that's what I think.
No question. No question.
But I don't you guys, anybody have anything?
Well, I strongly disagree with the 3-inch inseam. I mean, if that comes before me, I'll vote no.
That's why we want your input.
Is that 3?
It's not very long. I know that much.
Where did the 3-inch inseam come from?
I wondered that myself.
Okay, so
Where
did that come from? Well,
Yes.
the first part is that mid-thigh is not consistent, it's a loophole, as well as something coming to your fingertips is not consistent across body types, in which some hands can go way almost down to your knee, and some fingertips are right up.
I get that.
And depending on where you place your hands. So looking at then in conjunction with everything else is also that your bottom set of clothing does not expose undergarments or lack thereof. So when you think about 3 inches, if we are trying to be specific, and we think about something that goes from PK to grade 12, 3 inches on a kindergartner is about mid-thigh. So what can be appropriate then from PK as well through 12th grade that keeps decency, so it has the inseam width does not expose undergarments, does not expose lack of undergarments. And so if you can't wear a 3-inch inseam without people seeing what you have under it, then it's not appropriate.
You sure? I agree with that.
Did any of the other policies you look at have a inch inseam limit?
Yes.
Yes.
That was the last part of the last revision, and that came, actually from the Guyan Valley representative that found, policies that did have inseams attached to them. We did talk about, okay, what does that look like? And then kind of crossed it with does not expose undergarments or lack thereof. And so it's not an or, it's an and.
You won't find kindergarten shorts that has a 3-inch inseam. I mean, those are tiny little kids.
Mhm. And again, that's why I prefer a guideline over a policy.
But you see kindergarten, I mean, you've seen you have field day and they come to school and they wear shorts, and, little guys or gals like that, you can see they in shorts. I've got here to the high school and they're having an activity. A 3-inch inseam is an entirely different thing. That's why, maybe the problem is that we're expanding from K to 12, I don't know, but that just doesn't, I'm not necessarily expecting them to show any of their undergarments, but they're gonna come awful close to it, I'll tell you that much.
Well, here's my question. Did you look at common inseam lengths in the clothing industry? Look across different brands of clothing to see what inseam lengths major brands of clothing have in their shorts. I mean, I understand that.
3 and 5 crop and ankle length.
What, say that again now?
3, 5 cropped and ankle length.
What does 3, 5?
3
inch,
inch
5
inseam,
inch.
5 inch inseam, cropped ankle length.
What's
Ankle-
cropped?
So like cropped.
Oh, okay. These are different styles of shorts. then.
So if we require 4 inches, you can't buy them.
I don't know where you would find them.
Well, that
And you
sounds
require
good.
5 inches, our kindergartners
That
are
sounds
never,
good.
our kindergartners don't have to wear pants.
Ray and I was talking back today when we were in school, you couldn't wear shorts.
That's what I said.
No, we weren't allowed to wear shorts back
Yeah, we
then.
wasn't allowed to wear
No,
them.
had to wear jeans.
That resolved that right there.
That's right, took care of that problem.
Yeah, I had to Google that one.
But like I said, I think some of our current policies, and I feel like you all feel the same, what were current guidelines we have out there, that we may have something here already that maybe that all could somewhat agree upon.
I mean, as far as a specific policy, I like the LCHS policy. It's clear, it's easy to understand, but there's room for interpretation in there as well. And it addresses safety issues with clothing, in terms of why you can't wear pants that hang off the back of your feet.
I think Mr. Davis, he borrowed this dress code. He's had this for a while. Of course, John Lynn borrowed it from him, but he picked it up from another school district, maybe even in another state. Because I have quizzed him about this.
The one there that we've been, we're debating though, would still be an issue, I think, of the shorts.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they still, even in the high school in here, they don't really handle that very well. We're back to the fingertip business and all that.
Yep. Well, that's because there is no good way to handle it. I mean, that's what we're hearing. There is no good way to handle it because you take into account what clothes are available and how different body types wear all these different clothes that are available.
Somewhere common sense has to come into play.
Common sense,
You know,
and that's why you have a guideline, not a
right.
policy.
So, one of you alluded to this a few weeks ago. I mean, when each person can look at the same outfit and come away with something entirely different as whether or not they deem it appropriate or not. I've seen it so many times. So it's always going to be open to interpretation to whoever that person is that is making that
Do you think a
determination.
3-inch inseam
to
for a high school student is not distractive to somebody there?
Well, your question does not have context, so I'll answer it in several different ways. So the first one is which student, and if
Any
they're,
student.
well, for some students, that's going to look extremely long. For some students, that's
someone petite.
Someone petite that's going to look long. And for somebody that's tall, that's going to look extremely short. But if that person is thin, it's not going to appear inappropriate. If the person is heavier set, it will. There's an element that dress codes in and of themselves cannot discriminate versus ethnicity or body type or size. And common sense has to come into play. In addition, my question is then who is distracted, and is that the role of our dress code, or should we teach proper behavior?
The ones that would be distracted would be teenage males that would see something that, and you know, biology's biology here.
And again, you teach proper behavior.
Okay. So how you negate that is you know, I guess the one extreme is you don't allow shorts, so therefore that's not a problem anymore, or you try to come up with something that's reasonable. But, you know, it is what it is.
Steve, God help me, don't ever say that in another public forum, what you just said. That is, what you just said is discrimination poster child. You are going to require a girl to dress in a way so that she doesn't distract a boy. There's case law on top of case law that says that is absolute discrimination. You cannot, you can't look at it that way. You can't look at it that way. You have to address the behavior. That's what the law says, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, behavior is their behavior may be directly influenced by their distracted.
No question.
Well.
But the law says you cannot look at it and analyze it that way. It's discrimination to do it. And that's where she has an advantage on all of us. She's looked at all of this.
Well, she has that advantage, but she doesn't have the advantage necessarily of having dealt with it for many, many years and seen what the reality things are.
I think the committee did a lot, I did some good work in a short period of time. I was amazed at how quickly we were able to pull something together.
Let me ask
Took us a while to get
off
here.
of, now, we talked about the part that's lacking here about
You want to,
what's
go ahead.
disruptive, obscene, suggestive, drugs, pictures, slogans and all that. The last part, how that, something would have to be addressed with that.
Which one are you?
Well, the last sentence here, I think Rowdy mentioned
Oh,
earlier.
okay.
Yeah, the third bullet point in the LCHS policy and the last one.
Now, I'm talking about in the draft, in the last sentence.
Yes,
yeah.
and I alluded, Mr. Baker said that needed to be more specific.
Yeah.
Well, I think you can pull from
Like
these two
LCHS.
bulleted points here, but you have to have elements of both.
Mhm.
And you can make it short and simple, you know. I mean, you could have this, apparel, accessories, buttons that depict vulgarity or prohibited substance, including not limited to drugs, alcohol, tobacco, or gaming activity are prohibited, semicolon, but such items that contain messages that are considered constitutionally protected speech are permitted. You take away and you give it back. That gives some guidance while also saying, we're aware that you have constitutional rights, students, we're not trying to take those away. So, I mean, I can't say, sitting up here, that I agree that a 3-inch inseam is sufficient in all instances. To me, I've got three, one's 20 now, I gotta call her 3 teenage daughters. 3 inches inseam to me hangs 3 inches below the bottom of the butt. You know, I have my own guidelines for my daughters, there's things they wear, and I say, no, you're not going outside with that. That is sleepwear, that's housewear, you're not leaving my house dressed like that. But I don't know if they're 3 inches below or not. I think it's just, I don't think there's a good answer. I mean, I gave Steve grief over it, but I like the mid-thigh. Mid-thigh takes into account body type. Does that mean my daughter, who's 5'9", has to buy shorts with a 5-inch inseam to reach mid-thigh? Probably. Does that mean my daughter, who's 5'4", can buy ones with a 3-inch inseam and reach mid-thigh? Probably. But I mean, I don't know. I think what you all did takes into account a lot of things that we didn't individually consider. I think it does need some fine tuning like we talked about. But I think at the end of the day, without running afoul of discriminatory laws, we have to be more general than specific. And we have to count on common sense to play a role. And I don't disagree that unless you bullet point everything that is allowed and isn't allowed, you're gonna have some interpretation. That's where common sense has to come into play. You can't create a rule to govern and cover every situation that someone can come up with. It's impossible. If you could, there'd be no lawyers.
Wouldn't that be good?
No, it's all. Let me tell you what, everybody hates a lawyer until you need one, then I'm your best friend. When you get in trouble, it's my phone that rings first always. I'm everybody's number one speed dial when they get in trouble.
Right, I hate to call you, but.
So,
I know. Are you permitted to wear sunglasses in school?
This says no. Doesn't it?
Does it say that?
one of the policies says that, for one of the schools.
Oh,
The high school.
oh, I-
My question would
I
then
mean, this
be,
guy is the
my
draft.
question would then be, sir, if they have transition lenses and it's still dark when they come inside, are you gonna tell them they have to remove their glasses? Common sense tells me that trying to wear sunglasses all day is simply seeking attention, and I can handle that through insubordination. But if I say sunglasses are not prohibited and someone has transition lenses, then I run a risk of being discriminatory if they come inside on a sunny day.
I would consider sunglasses headwear that are not headbands, scarves, bows, etc. So I would consider that sunglasses in school are not permissible under this draft student guidelines. Prescription lenses, dark, clear, whatever, that, we're not touching that.
Right.
But this, see, it's not clear to me when I read this, the way this is.
Is that deliberate?
Yes, sir.
Well, but once again, I'm a parent out here, and I sent my kid to school, and he had this, and there's nothing there that says he can't do it.
And the teacher says, the principal says, hey, you can't wear sunglasses in school. The parent calls the administration says, right here, it says headgear. Sunglasses are headgear, they're not prescription, they can't wear them. There's no punishment this time, just have him not do it again.
Well,
That's how I see dress code issues being handled, not in-school suspension, not detention. I mean, if it's repetitive violations, yes. Common sense, God help us, common sense in rules and interpretation of them.
if all parents would understand that and buy that, then that would be wonderful. But I think there are those that might be argumentative about that.
Mhm.
But I just wonder why that wasn't in there. I mean, you give me your reasoning behind it.
I mean, it was, did you consider sunglasses headgear? I mean, when you were drafting this, you thought about sunglasses as headgear that an administration could say you can't wear those. But without specifically saying it, because you could run into issues with prescription glasses that have transitional lenses.
Yes, sir.
But you could have a policy that made that more clear. Because like Rowdy said, there's a distinction there between prescription glasses versus non.
And the problem, Steve, that you run into though is potentially discrimination again.
Because
Because when
I
that kid walks into school with the transition lenses that are dark, they are sunglasses.
But
But then,
it's medically required. There's some argument there.
the transition is
I
the dark
can't
lenses
ask.
on. Oh, what's that?
For the ADA, I can't ask. I can't ask whether or not they're prescription.
Well, I can tell if they're outside and they're clear and they come inside and they're dark.
And then they're clear.
Where are we now?
That's a good question. I'm gonna go back to, I guess, conversation we had a few moments ago about where we need what's next. Just my suggestion is that we clean up our policy, because it's obviously out of date. And it would be easy to do, to go in there and remove some of the language. Some of the language in that policy even talks about guidelines for our athletes and what they're expected to wear when they travel and go somewhere. I mean, that's just how old that policy is. So I think we can clean up the policy. I think we can write it in such a manner that it leaves it up to the superintendent to establish the guidelines, whether it's through a committee, whatever that may be, I think we've got a really good start on this. The board, of course, obviously can have input into the guidelines.
Yeah, I mean,
If you want, you can approve them.
I mean, I think what you mentioned earlier was you basically keep this policy down through here.
Right, that's
This
what
is the part that needs cleaned up.
That's
before we
right,
change
all
the
the
law.
bottom needs to go.
Everything from here needs to go. I mean, you leave it here, I mean, and I'm just brainstorming. Leave everything you have up there, you come down here, the superintendent shall develop administrative guidelines to implement this policy, period. Period.
So that takes care of the policy, and the next step would be developing a set of guidelines that will be consistent from school to school.
Yeah.
And based upon the discussion we've had, I don't think we're ever gonna come up with something that everyone's gonna wrap their head around and say, this is what we need. I just think it's just kind of human nature when it comes to this type of thing. My big concern all along has just been a natural relief for those that will say, well, what about, our employees and their dress? And that's why you have that one provision in there, one clause that says the expectations should be the same for administrators and staff. I think it even says central office administrators. So anyway, this is my suggestion.
I don't think our teachers should be wearing, maybe walking shorts, but I don't think they should be wearing 3-inch shorts at all.
I don't think they should be
Unless
wearing
it's
shorts
a
at all.
PE teacher.
Maybe
you know.
walking shorts
No.
to the knee,
Here.
but not,
Not me. Once again, I'll get back close to the board.
What is protected of staff dress is that they cannot violate student dress, but they are upheld in their professional code of conduct to appear professional in the job that they're assigned to do. So if they are dressing unprofessionally, whether or not a student could be permitted, they can have certain consequences, ramifications, suggestions for improvement. But to have a specific guideline for a teacher has not been upheld through
I mean,
the
we have a dress code for boys that's 4 sentences long. It says
Once
that.
again, students, their teacher's appearance affects how they act and how they learn, get right down to it. And a teacher that's dressed in that way, with shorts on and all, does not command the respect that a teacher that's dressed that way would. It's more, the professional part there is what it's all about. What's professional? And that to me isn't professional at all. I've had my wife, we haven't even talked about this thing, but over the years, my wife was an English teacher, and she dressed, she spent a lot of money, I'll tell you that. But she would tell me on the days, which they were very seldom, that she would wear slacks. Now, when she wore slacks, I mean, she still wore blazers and all this other stuff, how it was, or I did. But she would wear slacks on occasion. Most times she didn't. And she told me that she could tell the difference in her students and the way they responded on the days when she had slacks on. It's like she was having a down day, and they too could have that type of day. But, this has been many years ago when she would just make that comment to me that, I wore these, and this is, our kids acted differently than that. Same kids, same teacher, but she demanded more respect from them, and she was dressed differently. So to come in and choice to me is ridiculous. When I was a teacher, I wore a tie every day. Never had to. You didn't have to wear a tie. Nobody had to wear a tie. I wore a tie every day. I went out, I was telling Fred, I was out here teaching. We taught we didn't have art, music, PE or nothing. We taught everything. We didn't even get to go to the bathroom. But, go out here for PE, I'd take my tie, stick it underneath there and button it down, and we'd unloosen it, and we'd play softball or something, we'd go back in, pull it back on again. I didn't have to do any of that, probably crazy, but I did. But I know everybody's not going to do it, and it shouldn't be required necessarily, but it would be nice. I guarantee if they have some of these private schools, these parochial schools, see how they dress. And why do they dress the way they do? To command respect, and they get it. Both students, and I know the students have uniforms, I guess that's part of the you go there, you have to agree to doing that. But, I think what they are getting is respect, and the teachers are getting that. It's a two-way street between because of that.
Makes it a lot easier on parents, clothes for school too.
Well, yeah, and you don't have competition. You know, he's got on this type of shirt, and I can't afford it, and all that. So we want to get a uniform.
I don't have the budget for that.
I thought it was interesting with the state board that that's how they revised the policy this time around.
I wonder why.
That was surprising.
Is that some county?
In West Virginia case law, in the recent law book of 2019, a case was one that allowed a county board to command uniforms
So that was my question. There's somebody that actually is doing that or wants to do it?
or wanted to fight for it.
And then to go
Did
another
they say
step
who's
farther
gonna pay
and
for
say.
it?
I can't recall.
Don't know.
Well, this policy tells you that the state ain't paying for them. I mean, it clearly says, the advisory committee shall make recommendations on methods of paying for the school uniform. However, nothing in this policy shall require any level of funding from the legislature, state, or county boards of education, or any other agency of the government. So, as I read that, basically, your school's either got a fundraiser, or the parents have to pay for them if you adopt them. Boy, that'd be fun.
A lot of hot dogs.
No, I'm talking about become complaint lawyers.
So we clean up the policy.
Yep.
That's an easy do. And then we come up with a set of guidelines. We would like for us to bring those back to you once we develop those.
I mean, is there anything specific other than what Steve and I have talked about? I mean, the 3-inch inseam thing, I don't know what you do with it.
Well, take it out. That's no problem.
But how are you going?
Mid-thigh.
Mid-thigh makes sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's just stupidity, to say 3-inch inseam. I mean,
I had to Google that, but I didn't know what that meant.
Why do what
So
it's in the red?
let me ask you this, do we stay within this format that committees come up with, or do we go back to something similar to what Hamlin, Guy Valley, the high school has? It's a little more specific in terms of what the expectations are.
Well, I think you need some specificity in regard to those 2 bullet points that we talked about from the LCHS
Because
policy.
I think we can incorporate, we can take both of these, we can take it this way.
That's what I would think. Elements of this are good.
Yeah.
Merge them together or something.
Aren't you gonna need something rather soon for your,
We have 2 months before the kids come back.
the handbook?
Yeah, as far as the handbook's concerned, we're not gonna be able to get something in
Can't be
place.
published.
So the policy, we could maybe even have that in the next board meeting.
No, we're not at that part.
The guidelines,
That makes me old. We just talked about having
I'm not sure we can turn that around in the next couple, I just want to make new schedules.
If this is the 2 bullet points, we have no problem this one is not an issue. This is the issue. This one could be fixed tonight and.
We'll sit down and do some work on this.
And just bring us back send us a draft to look at, and then we can comment more on it individual, or we can talk about it in another board meeting, sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Come with the draft and we can look at it.
To the turnaround for agendas, I emailed the lady today, is between 5.5 and 6 weeks.
Right, we can't wait.
It's just, it's almost impossible for us to get
Yeah,
it.
and I think we need to, we do have a couple of months before the students are back. It gives us ample opportunity to work on this, bring it back to you for input.
Let me ask this. Is the most critical area of disagreement the length of shorts?
Why don't we go home?
Well, no, I mean, I
Measure your wife's shorts and then measure her standing up, because I cut off a pair of jeans today and my mother said, those are gonna be too short. Well, when I cut them off, they did look pretty short, but when I put them on, they were almost to my knees. Now, mind you, when I cut them off, they did look like they were gonna have a short inseam.
well, I
But
mean,
they
Were
were
they more
down
than
there
3
here.
inches?
Here's my thought. Here's my thought. What's the drop dead date for having something in the agendas? You said 5.5 to 6 weeks?
Well,
That's
I don't think we're
I
gonna be.
I think what we're gonna have to do is we're just gonna have to print the agendas without a dress code in.
This month.
Well, and that's where I was going with this. If you have something in the agenda regarding don't call it a dress code or dress code guidelines, but expectations for dress that embodies this, and then have a sentence that says specific guidelines for dress will be provided at the beginning of school, then that at least gives parents an idea when they get the agendas of what the policy's going to be. But it doesn't bind us to what you put in there. It just says that these are our expectations, but we have to resolve, as I see it, we can deal with what specifics need to go in here. And, I mean, I know we talked about shoes and how they attach and what is and isn't proper, but really it seems to me that the inseam, the length of shorts, is the big hang-up. Am I wrong?
It's number one, I think.
I'm more worried about the skirts being 3 inches.
Well, short skirts, I was lumping that all together.
I don't know how you measure that one. Well,
I do, but I'm not commenting on the record about how you measure it.
well, I'm just gonna say, when you Google it, it tells you, you measure from the crotch. I can see that was short.
So what's the problem with mid-thigh? Why do you think we shouldn't use mid-thigh as a guideline? Why should we use 3-inch inseam versus mid-thigh?
Well.
Well, no, let me stop you. Let me strike my question.
Okay.
Can we legally use mid-thigh as a guideline for length of short skirts?
You open up your loophole of loops. Because mid-thigh is subjective.
Agreed.
Then how do you choose to measure it? And is it discriminatory on height? Is it discriminatory towards females versus males?
Mid-thigh's the same no matter how tall you are.
It-
My mid-thigh's right there. And if I
Oh,
was
if it
shorter, it'd
is.
still
If
be
it
right
is, if it is
there.
3-inch inseam, will cover you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And 3
You got a
inches is right
2-inch
there.
inseam.
Big difference. Now, you'll have to show me that in the law book that says that's discriminatory.
Now, Fred, that was pretty short, buddy.
Well, his arms as long as they push it, so he couldn't really extend it.
But I'm saying mid-thigh still covers you up no matter how
Yeah,
short
but
you are.
that was short where you had
Well,
your.
Yeah, where you held mid-thigh was short. I expect that was a 3-inch
His modeling
inseam,
skills
Fred.
weren't really accurate. But I think mid-thigh is not discriminatory. It doesn't matter your body type. Your mid-thigh is gonna be your mid-thigh. And it takes into account that if you're tall or short or whatever,
Yeah,
in all
I'm with you.
likelihood,
Down here.
if you're proportioned that way, your thigh area is gonna be in proportion to your body, mid-thigh.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the same for everybody.
What are we missing? I can see you want to say something. What are we missing?
Anatomically, that's not correct. Your femur and your tibia are 2 separate lengths. Your femur, which is your thigh bone that holds the largest blood vessels, and you don't want to break it before you die. And your tibia and in your lower leg are 2 separate lengths. Your mid-thigh is based on the length of your femur. Your femur starts where it inserts into your hip and then goes to the top of where your kneecap is, where your patella meets in your tibia. And so depending on your anatomical position, your mid-thigh is open to be subjective.
But everyone's the same. I mean, you can go to this scientific explanation of anatomy here for me.
I mean-
if you want to, but from the knee down is immaterial.
Okay?
The knee up is what matters.
Okay.
And mid-thigh is mid-thigh.
Okay?
And I don't see how it's discriminatory. If you're, no matter what your size, your shape is, it's still the same for everyone. It's something that's defendable. It's a standard everybody must meet. And
Or you could put 2 inches above the knee.
That's right. Can you
Use the knee.
Okay, my
Hey,
question is,
That's
what
really
is the,
wrong.
what's the purpose of 2 inches above the knee?
well, that
What's the
covers you
purpose?
up.
Well,
Well,
from whose perspective? And for what purpose? The goal of the dress code for a public institution is not to place moral or appropriate jurisdiction on others. It's to make things appropriate and safe for an environment. And that's where the rubber meets the road. And that's what you have to be able to defend without moral defense.
That's ridiculous.
I didn't make the law.
Well, I mean, I don't agree with that, and I think it's, that is probably, I don't know, I haven't looked at any case law. But if you're trying to tell me that you can't establish standards of, once again, what you expect students to abide by, that, so that when they go out into the real world, that they've been modeled in such a way that they can function that way. I don't agree with that at all.
Well, I agree with her that 2 inches above the knee, you're gonna get a lot.
Well,
I don't know
I
about
just
2
said 2 inches, it could be 5 inches.
And the problem is, the problem with all this is what I said early on. The more specific you get, the more you run afoul of the law, because it's, I mean, we can sit up here and we can say to ourselves, now, we'll strike that as well. We all know, without saying, that a big constituent ingredient of a dress code is cover-up to prevent distraction, but we can't say that. That cannot be a reason for our dress code. It cannot be a legal reason for our dress code. If it is, we've just broken the law. So it's one of those things we can know, and we can develop a dress code that has that incidental purpose, but it can't be a purpose of the dress code that we espouse. It can't be, right?
Well, let me ask you this. Being a school, we have to, the school dress code has to be the same as an office down the street here.
No.
Same dress.
No.
We're going to school for an education, not model fashion clothes. You mean, what would be discriminatory out here in the workplace is discriminatory against, on students too?
Well, now in the workplace though, you have the choice of working there. We have an obligation to provide public education to our students. They are bound to abide by our rules, or they can be homeschooled or private school. But we can't make rules that interfere with their ability to get this free public education. An employer can say, if you want to take my pay, these are the dress guidelines. If you don't want to follow them, then you work somewhere else. That's not discriminatory. That's their rules. But we have different burdens on us as a public institution, as a purveyor of public education.
With the exception of the uniform thing, get back to that. Why would a county put into effect a uniform to do kind of what Fred's alluded to there, to make sure that it meets a certain standard? That, and you know, whether you use the word being destructive or whatever you want to call it, they're going to make sure their uniforms meet a certain code, and they aren't going to do any of those things. Now, is that violating their rights? Well, you provided a uniform, everybody's got to wear the same one. You know, am I going to be able to get an attorney to go in and argue that because you're making me wear this uniform and it goes below my knees or something on my skirt, you're taking away my constitutional rights?
I mean, I could see that, I mean, look to me like that, but
It's already been litigated, and the Supreme Court said you can have a uniform, right?
Well, but I'm just saying, that argument there, that allows you a lot of discretion into the way what type of wear they're gonna have. So, you know, why couldn't one argue that that's discriminatory? Because that's not the way I like to dress. You know, I know you're providing it for me, but I don't really like that. You know, because I only need to express myself.
in our guidelines, I mean, everybody's supposed to abide by them, so they'd be the same as a uniform, but we looked at it.
Well, that's what I'm saying, there's a,
And Rowdy, you talk about, Vince, specifying exactly what, a half, certain thing. Well, that's 6 inches, sure is a specification,
6 inches.
inseam. From 3 inches, or what it was.
Well, we've already
3
had
inch, yeah, that's
3
the
inches
specific.
listed in here, in our old guidelines. We've already had that listed, and there was still problems
Did
with
somebody
it.
have 3 inches already?
Said?
Yeah, I believe it was Guy Valley.
I don't remember anybody having it.
Yeah, it's
3
there.
inches.
What was that, Carol?
One of the
3
schools
inches.
had
No,
a
Guy
3 inch.
Valley and Hamlin said mid-thigh.
Okay, somebody.
The only ones I saw were the fingertips and the mid-thigh.
Yeah.
I read it on.
Me too.
That's why the other one, I didn't understand what it meant. I had to Google it.
I don't remember which school it was, but I did read it.
Right here, West Hamlin, shirts and shorts and skirts should be no shorter than 2 inches above the knee.
Oh, above the.
But the knees, see, now that's what I'm talking about.
That wasn't in.
Well, again, a lot of these things that we're trying to address with specificity, in my opinion, are better off addressed with generality and in enforcement of the rules. We're not ever gonna come up with a length for short skirts that everybody agrees first complies with the law, and second, everybody likes. Because there's problems with no matter what we do. I'm fine with mid-thigh, the problem comes in interpretation of it. I understand why it's discriminatory, but I think also 3-inch inseam is discriminatory for the very same reasons. Because 3 inches on a person with a long tibia, is that right? Tibia's top bone?
Femur.
Femur is gonna look way different than 3 inches on somebody with a short one. So I think again, it comes down to enforcement, to guidelines versus policy and enforcement.
Well, what's wrong with 3 inches above the knee?
Can you buy shorts that gonna come 3 inches above the knee?
Well, evidently, West Hamlin.
You cut 'em off.
Well, West Hamlin, I mean, who knows where that came from? I mean, that's just,
Mr. King may have put that.
He did. It's Kirk King's fault.
Blame me.
Well, nobody makes you wear shorts.
I mean, we were given a directive to come with the policy, and I will defend that policy because that policy at West Hamlin was determined at that time by a team of teachers and staff members and community members, and they all agreed on it. So therefore, it was put into place as our guideline, or our policy. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the thing we're missing, the mark, and it's been discussed multiple times, consistency and common sense.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna stop talking.
I agree.
I think we are making this more complicated than it needs to be. We're putting far more thought into it, I think, than the general public would.
Just, once again, I just used the CTE program where we're trying to prepare kids for their futures and their careers. And they wear attire that's commensurate with what they're going to do in life, whatever it might be. And if they're going to be mechanics, they're going to dress in that fashion or whatever it is. And they have certain standards they're abiding by. Now I'm assuming we're allowed to do that because they agree to these things,
Right.
they're going to do that. And I'll sign a contract because I'm going to abide by all these requirements that you have here. But that's preparing somebody for the real world. And we have to have something that's somewhere, not maybe that stringent, I don't know if that's the right word or not, but something that still, and they allude to it in some of these policies, prepares them for what's going to happen later on. Unfortunately, what's happened too often now is they're so lenient that when they get out there, they think it's okay to go to a job interview and dress like I mentioned earlier. And then if I'm the hirer, I'm thinking, hey, this person's really serious, they come in here looking like that? What kind of modeling is that? And that is, if they're not going to get it at home and at their school, then that's the way they're going to think it's okay. That's the way society accepts things, and it shouldn't be that way. I'm going to let Jeff take over and say, I think we better know.
I think we beat this horse to death about an hour
Yeah, I
ago.
think we did too. Again, I think here's what I think needs to happen. I think we need to revise our policy. So what, we should be able to bring that to you at the next meeting. Now, I don't know if we'll have some guidelines we can look at or not in that short turnaround.
There isn't much revision to the guidelines. I mean, there isn't much we
Well-
asked for. I mean,
I guess for me, it's a matter of having some other eyes on it as well.
okay.
Because, you know, principals are gonna be ultimately responsible for upholding whatever we come up with. And in the past, they've had the responsibility of developing these guidelines. So it's something I personally think we probably ought to share with our principals as well.
Well, I think everybody, because eventually,
You know, because I mean,
And there may be good ideas.
right.
I mean, they're the ones on the ground trying to enforce these. There may be good ideas that come to us from them. Things we want to consider and you know, include.
I think we've got plenty of time here to come up with something, that will work for all the schools. We've got 2 months till the kids come back.
well, it doesn't necessarily have to be, like I say, it could be a supplement to the handbook.
Right, and that's what we'll probably do anyway. I mean, we're gonna have to. So when the students come back, then we'll give them, you know, the information to take to their parents. We'll do school messengers, you know, whatever we need to do. Put it on the county website because it's gonna be countywide guidelines. We can communicate what the expectations
Mr. Mischke, if I'll have a insert placed in the agendas, a plastic sleeve that we can slide give to the principals,
There you go.
give to the students, and they can slide it right down
Pop
into
it
their
right in.
agendas.
I like
They
it.
do provide that, it costs us 6 cents an agenda, it's worth it.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Maybe
Problem
Mr.
solved.
King.
How often is this a problem in our system?
Not very often. This time of year, at the end of the school year, typically is when we do get complaints. Generally, it's on the opposite end, that we're not enforcing our dress code policy.
See, that is what I've never been called or anything about, you know, the ones I receive are the exact opposite.
Those are the ones I hear.
Too lenient.
The grocery
It's all
store, the
this,
gas
it's all that.
station.
Go out to the school and stand in the hallway.
Yeah,
Watch them.
it's
How they
usually the
come
high
out.
school. I mean, typically that's, you know, right at the complaints. But it's rare. Why, I mean, it's not that often that we get any complaints about enforcement of our dress code or what the expectations.
Maybe we're worrying a little bit too much about them?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think we have a plan. If it's okay with the board, then that we'll come back with a draft policy for you to look at the next meeting. And in the meantime, we'll be working to clean up the guidelines, and we'll bring those back to you as well. Maybe even the next board meeting. I don't know how quickly we can turn this around, but we'll do our best to do so.
You're short-staffed now, aren't you?
We are. This is a tough time of year because people are taking their vacations. We'll do our best to try to get as much feedback as we can and input from our administrators, both at the school level and here at the central office, into the policy, or into the guidelines, and, you know, we'll bring it back to you.
Okay, pretty good.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Dr. Lowe, thank you for your assistance this evening.
You'll never agree with me again,
I will do whatever you ask of me.
Of all the
sir.
things you've had to come before the board with, you never dreamed a simple discussion on dress code would be the most heated, did you?
Oh, I did.
Probably anticipated it,
I anticipated.
but we do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll talk to you about this, I guess, tomorrow. We'll follow up.
Notice Mr. Linville hadn't said anything.
It's a wise
He knows
man.
the cameras on over here.
I have a comment after
We'll just tell Sean, we don't want to have that video. Rosemary Woods got a hold of it. He raised it.
Yeah, maybe
I have access to the cameras.
Did somebody turn it off?
No, it's
No, it's
running.
been
It's
on.
asking me to take care of it
I
at the end
guess
of the
it's on
meeting.
all the time, I don't know.
Yeah.
What you like?
Quit flashing.
With her plans.
It was flashing.
I'll see.
Okay. Let's look, Fred went to the restaurant. Yeah. Anybody else if you want to?
Went to measure.
You got him all flustered. His arms weren't.
He had that about an inch and a half from his crotch.
Cameras on curve.
Oh,
You've done it again.
Second time I ever got you.
Everybody won't be the last with us. Quit laughing, Susan.
Yeah.
We could have you be our model as to how we're gonna do this. We're in different times. Now, here's Susie with a 3 inch, here she's 5. Here it is mid-thigh.
This is mid-thigh.
Look how red her face is.
Okay, let's go to the, let's move right along here to the administrative session. So moved. Ms. Baker.
Second.
Ms. Smith. All right, Ms. Mickey.
Item A, out-of-state travel for Misty Tully to Baltimore, Maryland, July 7th through July 14th, 2019, to attending the Making Schools Work Conference. It's funded out of Title I. And this is based on standards, right?
It is a standards-based, and it fits into their, Duval's CSI diagnostic, and it revolves around standards, and it's school Title I funds.
Thanks, Kirk. Item B, let's remove that one from the agenda tonight. It's not going to happen.
All of item B.
All of item B.
Okay, let's delete item B. Okay.
Item C is out-of-state travel for the following: to Boston, Massachusetts, June 17th through June 23rd, 2019, to the MIT Eureka Fest presentation, funded out of Title II. That's part of the grant that Mike McCormick shared with us at the LSIC presentation at the high school. back
That
in
is
the fall.
correct. They had more team members participate than the grant allowed, but we wanted our students to present their electronic high tunnel, so we have secured some Title II funds to make that happen.
This is a tremendous opportunity for our kids. I think there's 8 students who are going to participate.
Yes, sir.
So it's exciting, and we may have some information to share with you when they come back. Item D, the adoption of the Lincoln County Board of Education 2019-2020 meeting schedule. Item E, the following out-of-county student transfer for the 2019-2020 school year. Item F is a contract agreement with John D. Streety to provide learning concepts and engaging strategies for teachers at West Hamlin Elementary, Lincoln County Schools to use with students according to the terms of the contract. And it's outstanding training. I attended a couple of his presentations back in the day when I was doing it last year. It's phenomenal. So I'm excited that we're able to get him here. Item G, 5 additional employment days for the following music / band instructors to conduct a mini band camp June 27, 28, 2019, and July 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 2019 at Lincoln County High School. I'd also request that we be able to add a new hire that's on the personnel schedule here in a few minutes. At Hamlin PK8, and the teacher's name is Shelby Varner, Shelby. Varner is Varner. She's replacing Keith Meadows. Keith has been on the position at West Hamlin Elementary School. And finally, item H, Amy Adkins, reclassified from Secretary 3 to Executive Secretary effective July 1, 2019. Award back pay pursuant to the terms of the settlement agreement. I still do not have the date that we are to back up and begin for paying her. So Leslie's working with Ms. Atkins' rep, and I should have that for maybe the next board meeting, what the amount would be.
Well, you say you're pursuant to the terms of the agreement, right?
So Leslie and I have been talking today. Anyway, I hope to have that here soon. We'll get that squared.
All right. Do you have any questions or comments from anyone? Okay, so I'll move the votes then with the exception of item B, which is construct, and the addition of Shelby Varner under item G. Is that all yes vote?
Yes.
All right. Finance, motion please.
So moved.
Larry? Maria? Ray?
Schedule of invoices totaling $609,174.48 listed attached. And the Lincoln County Summer 2019 payroll schedule is also attached.
That schedule pretty is typical of the summer schedule normal. Same thing.
Yeah, same thing.
Okay, anybody have any comments, questions about those? Not, is that an all yes on finance?
Yes.
All right. Let's go to personnel, motion please.
I'll move.
Brownie?
Second.
Larry made the second, Becky first, okay.
We want to make sure they have a revised one. Laid one up there, it says revised right under
Says
personnel
revised
schedule.
under personnel schedule. He didn't show me where revised was written.
Okay, item A, employment of short, long-term substitute professional personnel. Item B, employment of professional personnel. Item C, transfer of professional personnel. D, employment of service personnel. E, transfer of service personnel. F, employment of extracurricular personnel. G is a continuation of that. And also at the bottom, rescind the May 21st, 2019 leave of absence for Debbie Wheeler. She was on workers' comp and somehow wires got crossed and we put her down for a leave of absence. So,
Debbie didn't.
yeah, so we had to correct that. We will have a posting going out tomorrow. Joanne and I worked on it today, pending a lot of this stuff here, so, we will have, appreciate you letting us bring in a revised agenda. We was able to add about 10 or 12 people here that we wouldn't have been able to do, which keeps going. Next board meeting, I will not be here. I'm going to be out of town, but Joanne's going to be gone, but we're taking our laptops, we're communicating. We will have an agenda. Since I've read Ray's 100 times, I thought maybe I'll try to train him before.
No. I'll take care of you.
I can do it, I promise.
You got it worked in.
But, you know, we did fill some of these vacancies, but these transfers created vacancies at other places, so we'll
That's
go
what
on all
happens
summer
this time of
long.
the year. They start moving around.
But, once again, if anyone asks, always the question is, when's the last day I can move, or when can I get on my contract? It's July 30th board meeting.
July 3rd.
That'll be on our website. Angie and I talked about that today, so.
Good. Okay, anybody have any, there's a whole host of them here, so good job, Bill. You got a lot of people going to work here summer and get ready for next year.
I would like to add that some of these that were real quality. Sometimes you don't get quality, but we got some real quality people for some of these positions.
Good. Can't beat that. Okay, any questions on it? If not, is that an all yes on personnel?
Yes.
All right, on that. Okay, let's go to comments, concerns. Board members, anybody?
I think you need to talk about the dress code.
I have one item, and then I'll let Jeff do his thing. Okay. Here's a copy of the superintendent's evaluation. I need you to bring that back at our next meeting, and we will meet on.
Fortunately, it doesn't say anything about the dress code in there. So
Well, don't worry, we're gonna.
we'll get that good September, right?
Let's wait till we get to see what he recommends for you.
Well, we're gonna get together on the 18th, and after we'll compile his results for this year. But that's our annual thing that we do. Okay, that's the only thing I have to
Okay, today was the last day for students. It really has been a good year. It goes by so quickly. It's just amazing, the school
We
year.
have so much fun.
You know, we do, that's true. Tomorrow's the last day for our 200-day employees. Funny thing, we have an OS day left this year. And it's been so long since we have had an OS day remaining at the end of the school year that people have questioned about what they were supposed to do. It's been funny, it's comical at times today. So we even sent out, we ended up sending out a school messenger to all our employees. We sent out an email blast. You know, that is a day off for everyone.
Vacation.
They're so accustomed, especially here at the central office, working those OS days, because typically, you know, that's what happens when we end up making a false instruction.
So on that OS day, the board office will not be open.
There will be no one working without my approval. There are some exceptions on Thursday. So
Yeah, because, you know, originally the OS days, the whole purpose of that was to allow, in lieu of pay raises,
Like a holiday.
Yeah, well, you get some vacation days here, 4 days, whatever it was. Now, if we have to make up school, you lose it.
It's
a
probably
long
been
time.
4 or 5 years maybe,
At
since the
least.
last time we had Wednesday remain at the end of the calendar. So,
Good.
anyway, that was worth sharing. Principal interviews for Hearts were conducted today. 4, right? There were 5 applicants, we ended up interviewing 4. So I will have a recommendation for you at the June 18th board meeting.
So did you end up having only 4 applicants?
Yes, one dropped out.
And finally, this weekend, this past Saturday, if you don't know, we had an activity at the high school, transportation, put it on for anyone that, out there that may be interested in being a bus operator. And we had a big turnout. There were 16 people who came. And 14 have already asked to sign up to be substitute bus operators. And the training is coming up here in the next couple of weeks.
Do these people already have CDLs?
No, we'll have to train them, and they'll have to go through that process, but we are in such desperate need of substitute drivers. It's exciting.
I know Jeff told me, Jeff Dyer, that they want to do this. Did they actually drive the bus around the parking lot or something like that?
Around the school.
To see if this is, can I really do this? And
Yeah, so it was really a huge success.
yeah, it's a great idea.
So I'm sure we'll do it again this time next year.
I started out there and see if I could do it.
I don't mind hanging out there.
Go over to the ball field, soccer field.
Was it you talking about the picture on the bus?
Yeah,
Buses
yeah.
piled in together last day. Okay, that's all I
That's all
have.
you have? Okay. Well, if that's the case, let's adjourn then until Tuesday, June the 18th, 2019, 6 p.m. here at the county office.
So moved.
Mr. Wilkerson?
Second.
Mr. Curry? Oh, yes?
Yes.
All right. Let's see what time it is, 7:52. And then have an
Stacy,
executive.
can you email me a copy of the board meeting schedule?